Hi, everyone. This is Cassandra Thomas from Safe+Ready Institute. I'm pleased to welcome presenters from Do One Thing, Raynika Battle and Ronda Oberlin.
Thank you so much, Cassandra, and thank you to everyone for joining us. So again, welcome to the Do One Thing Ambassador Training. This is a course for anyone who is interested in teaching and preparing their community or organization to be better prepared for disasters of all shapes and sizes, such as tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, or any number of natural, technological, and human-caused disasters. Preparing for disasters can seem like a lot of work, especially if you think there's a good chance a disaster will happen. But with the help of Do One Thing, preparing is easy and it's simple, and we have the steps that can help you for any unexpected event. Do One Thing's mission is to move individuals, families, and businesses, as well as communities, to prepare for all hazards and become disaster resilient. Preparedness lays the groundwork for crisis communication and makes better decision makers, and ultimately improves disaster outcomes like minimizing deaths, injuries, and property losses. People who are prepared are more likely to get back on track after a disaster and less likely to rely on disaster shelters, insurance, and other services that often only cover a small portion of what you may need. So it definitely assures better communication and coordination, as well as supporting better decision making, as well as improving, again, disaster outcomes. Our goals: as an ambassador, you will help improve disaster outcomes by engaging and educating your community. Preparedness information reaches more people when we partner together. So many times people will also trust and accept information more when it comes from someone that they know, someone that they have a relationship with as well. There are many places that preparedness information can be taught or preparedness material can be given out. Having a booth at a community fair or any other type of event, including newsletters, giving presentations in your communities, any way that you're involved in your own community is a great way to get that information out. As you listen to each lesson, think about the people in your community and how you might reach out to them. So we would definitely encourage you to take notes and draft your plan of action so that you'll be able to implement it after completing this course. And lastly, looking at our objectives. The first one, understand the importance of preparing for emergencies and disasters. We want you to become familiar with Do One Thing program materials, our philosophy, as well as the tools that are available to you to use. Also, to understand your target audience and become prepared to teach them. And lastly, we want you to be confident and perform emergency preparedness training and outreach in your own community. And now we'll turn it over to Rhonda, who's going to do Unit 1.
We're going to talk about improving disaster outcomes. As preparedness ambassadors, we want you to not only know how to help people prepare for disasters, but we really want you to understand why we want people to prepare for disasters. And there's a lot more to emergency preparedness than just emergency supplies. You know, having a 72-hour supply kit, having a flashlight and a bottled water in your home, it's going to keep you more comfortable in your home. But what really saves lives and prevents injuries and property damage in a disaster is good disaster decision-making skills. But people can develop those good disaster decision-making skills by putting together their kit. And we're going to talk a lot more about that. But really remember that our aim is to have people who can make good disaster decisions. It's important to understand that not everyone is impacted by a disaster equally. Disasters can happen anywhere, they can happen to anyone, but you know, if you don't have enough money for insurance, you know, you're going to be more impacted by a disaster. If you live in an area that's high hazard, like a floodplain or near a highway, you're going to be more likely to be impacted by a disaster. People with disabilities may not be able to follow emergency instructions. People who don't speak English well, especially recent immigrants, refugees, may not be able to understand emergency instructions, and they may not have the network of people that we all rely on when an emergency happens. So people who are already struggling with finances or having trouble with everyday tasks, those are the people that are going to be hardest hit by the disaster, and those are also the people who may not feel like they can prepare for disasters. And we want to make sure that we're empowering people and that we're showing people that preparing for emergencies doesn't have to be hard and it doesn't have to be expensive. There are small steps that anybody can take to be better prepared for a disaster. So as you're thinking about who you can reach out to in your community, keep these things in mind. You know, we have, everybody has vulnerable people in their community. They're the people who will be hardest hit and the people who need the information the most. And those are the people that we can empower through Do One Thing. So in a disaster, you know, we tend to think about, from an emergency management standpoint, where Raynika and I are, we tend to think about people in a very passive role in a disaster. You're sitting in your home and the disaster happens around you. But in reality, people are responding to the disaster. You have to make decisions in the middle of the disaster, and it's a difficult environment to make decisions in a lot of times. So if we can equip people ahead of time, they can make good decisions about how they're going to follow emergency instructions. You know, if you get an order to evacuate, you know, a lot of us can just go out to pack things up, go out to our car and drive to a hotel or drive to a family or friend's home. And not everyone can do that. So when they get that instruction, we want them to be able to make a good decision about how they can respond. If they don't have a car, if they have, you know, a bedbound spouse or something else, how can they safely respond to the best of their abilities and their resources in accordance with their own priorities and their own knowledge. Preparedness information is an important part of improving disaster outcomes. When people have preparedness, they're better able to interpret emergency instructions and warnings, and that improves disaster outcomes. And I just want to give you an example of this. Picture yourself, you just got a new job on the top floor of a high-rise building. But your first week in the office, you're sitting at your desk and an alarm goes off. You don't know what it means. You look around. Everybody else is looking around too. And finally, the person in the cubicle next to you leans over and says, "It's nothing to worry about, it's just a drill," and goes back to work. So what's your input in this event? You don't see any visible sign of danger. Nobody else seems to know what to do either, and somebody's recommended that you just ignore it. Now back up and imagine what would happen if you had, on your first day of work, had a briefing from the building safety manager. And he had said, you know, this is what the alarm sounds like. We only use the alarm when there's a real emergency. You know, if there's a drill, we always let people know. It takes 45 minutes to evacuate this building fully. And in most emergencies, the stairway is the safest place to be. Is that going to change how you interpret that alarm? That's what emergency preparedness does. That's what risk communication does. That's what helping people build those frameworks ahead of time helps them interpret warnings and warning signs more accurately. And that improves disaster outcomes, and that's our goal. And the number one problem with disasters isn't that people don't believe they'll happen. Some people don't. But mostly, people believe that whatever does happen, they'll be able to handle it. They don't understand that disasters change things. And that's why, you know, I say that the three most important words in convincing people to prepare for emergencies is disasters change things. Disasters change things physically. For us, we have a stress reaction when we're in a dangerous or unknown situation. I mean, they change things in the environment. If people don't believe that disasters change things, a lot of times they won't feel like it's worth it to invest. If you think that you can handle anything that comes up, if you think that a flood isn't anything to worry about, you dry things out, you're fine, that a tornado will never come to your house, will never impact your house, you're going to be a lot less likely to prepare for an emergency, because it's about the cost and the benefit. Am I going to get enough out of this investment of my resources to make it worthwhile? So with Do One Thing, we like to minimize the cost and really highlight the benefits for people. But you can see in people's, in the reasons that people give for not being prepared, that this is true. It's not too hard or expensive if you really believe that disasters change things. And there's always information out there about what to do, but it takes more resources to go and find that information. And if people don't believe that things will happen, they aren't likely to do that. So this is a statement made by a woman who was blind after her house flooded. "My first and greatest mistake was not to have thought about flooding and what it meant before this. If you know what to expect, you can be better prepared." And the most important part of that statement is and what it meant. You know, it's okay, you know, if you believe that a disaster will affect you, that's great. It's even better if you know what it will mean if that disaster affects you. You know, there's a river outside your house. What will it mean to you specifically, to you, your home, your family? Do you have a basement? Will equipment be damaged? Can you get out of the house safely? Are you in a wheelchair? Are you blind? Everybody is impacted by disaster differently, and that's really the goal of preparing for an emergency, to think through, if this happens, how will it impact me? Because that's where you can solve problems, make plans, and prepare for those emergencies. So what do you really get with an emergency supply kit? You get self-confidence, and you can call this satisfaction, you can call it a relief of anxiety, but when something happens and you're prepared and you can get out the first aid kit, or you can get out the flashlight, or whatever else it is, you have a sense of satisfaction. You have a sense that you're able to take care of yourself, and that's very empowering. You know, you can teach your kids through these moments too. Kids sometimes will have disaster anxiety. I was a very anxious child. I was terrified of tornadoes. And my grandmother used to say things like, there hasn't been a tornado around here in 100 years. And 7 years old, and I'm thinking, then we're due. It did nothing to relieve my anxiety to hear that it wasn't going to happen. What it relieved my anxiety was knowledge, to be able to think through exactly, okay, a tornado could hit here, what's going to happen, and what can I do about it? That's empowering, that reduces anxiety, and I think that's really important for kids and for adults. You get a better understanding of disaster when you create an emergency supply kit. As you're putting that kit together, you're thinking about, okay, what will we need if? What about medication? What about hearing aid batteries? What about our pets? And you think those things through, and then it creates an expectation of what we will really be like when that disaster hits. And that mental framework that you build when you think through, okay, this could happen, and this can happen, and this is what I'm going to do if. That gives you a sense of control again, and an understanding of what you're going to need. And again, a sense of control when you need in a disaster. I'm very known for getting ahead of myself. So think about it. You're at home with your kids, and the power goes out. It's a terrible rainstorm, thunder, lightning, heavy rain. The power goes out. You don't know, you're searching around with your cell phone for a flashlight or a candle or something, and then you hear water, and you realize that because the power's out, your sump pump's out, and now your basement's flooding. It's one problem after another. Problems are occurring faster than you can solve them. But what if you thought this through ahead of time? What if you've made a plan? Now, with power goes out, you know right where the flashlight is. Everybody's got a job to do. Everybody does their job. You go downstairs because you know that the sump pump's going to go out. You've thought about it ahead of time, and you're able to, you can't stop the sump pump from going out, but at least you can move things out of the way. You can turn off the power in the basement, and then you go upstairs and you wait for the power to come back on. So instead of one problem after another, now you've got a problem that a set of circumstances that you were ready for. And now if something unexpected does happen, you're calm, you're ready for it, you're more confident, and you're going to be able to handle anything unexpected. And one thing we need you to remember as a preparedness ambassador for Do One Thing is that preparedness is a choice. People have to make the decision to prepare for themselves. They make decisions every day. You know, they make decisions about themselves, their property, their family, and we just want them to make sure, we want to make sure that they're making an informed decision. So we want them to understand that disasters change things, that there is a stress reaction when we're in a disaster. And if you've ever been in a situation, a medical emergency, a fire, anything, you know that feeling. And until you experience it, sometimes it's hard to imagine. So it's important for us to talk people through this, to understand that when our bodies change and when we're threatened, when anything unexpected happens, you know, you get a rush of adrenaline, you get a fight or flight reflex. It becomes hard to think sometimes, and people need to understand that. And the environment changes as well. You know, you may not have the resources that you have a minute into the disaster that you had a minute before. You may not be able to pick up the phone and call 911. It may be dark outside where it was light. It may be smoky. There may be, you know, something in the air. So those are things that change in a disaster. And if people understand that, they're going to be better prepared for it and be better able to make that decision about how or if to prepare their family. People need to understand that emergencies can happen anywhere. And they also need to understand that they're the ones that can make a plan that works for them. There is no perfect emergency plan on the shelf that's going to work for everybody. Everybody has different resources, they have different circumstances, they have different priorities, and they are the ones that have to make that plan for themselves. And then also they need to understand that the decisions that they make about preparing it's bigger than just them. It's about their family, it's about their neighborhood, it's about their community. You know, preparedness, emergency preparedness is, it's not a machine that has to have 100% of its parts in place in order for it to work. It's a toolbox. And if you have one or two tools, you're going to be better off than if you don't have any. And not all of the tools are going to work for everybody. This is about finding the tools that work for them and teaching them how to use them. So another benefit of acknowledging that people have a choice about preparing is that it makes them feel like active participants. You know, when you have to do something that you don't want to do, but you know you have to, whether it's, you know, going to the doctor for a physical or paying your taxes or anything else, if you don't want to do it, you'll do it because you have to. You may resent it, it may cause you stress, but you're going to do what you have to do and probably no more than that. But when you are an active participant, when you do something because you think it's important, you're more willing to invest your time and energy with it. You're going to do it more willingly, more thoroughly, and it's going to cause you a lot less stress. It actually relieves stress instead of creating stress. And remember, stress is what we're trying to get rid of. If you have low stress, then you're going to be a better disaster decision maker. So acknowledging that people have a choice, you know, acknowledges that they are participants in this. They are not victims. They are people who are going to respond to a disaster to the best of their abilities. It promotes personal responsibility and it empowers them. And that's one of the things we're trying to do with Do One Thing is empower people. We don't want anybody to walk out of a preparedness training feeling discouraged and anxious. We want them to feel empowered and confident and ready to take on the disaster. It legitimizes their perspective and it shows respect. And, you know, as a presenter, you know, you show your audience respect, they're much more likely to respond in kind. So, all right, I want you to take a minute to think about what motivates you to prepare. What are you interested in protecting that you would be willing to invest your resources in? And this is something that you can ask the people in your group. You know, you can do it as an icebreaker when you do introductions. Say, you know, give me your name and list one person, place, or person, thing, place that you would be, that you want to protect in a disaster. But understanding what motivates other people to prepare is going to help you be a better presenter. Some people are really concerned about protecting their independence. People with disabilities, seniors, are sometimes feel like their independence is threatened. And they're going to go a long way to try to protect that independence. They're worried that if they have to leave their home for any reason, somebody's going to put them in an institution and they're not going to be able to get back to it. So recognize what motivates the group that you're talking about and show them how Do One Thing can help them accomplish those goals. So here's an example. If somebody is concerned about protecting their independence, you can show them how keeping their home from being damaged or having a generator, taking other steps, can keep their home as a safe place that they can stay in. If somebody's concerned about the environment, you know, you can show them that not allowing a hurricane or a flood to damage their home can keep hazardous chemicals from getting into the environment. If people are concerned about others in the community, then stress how if they're prepared at home, they're going to be better equipped to go out and help in the community. Or how if they have the resources they need at home, then those are resources that can go to other people. Other resources in the community can be used for other people. You know, we want to tie into what people care about because it helps them personalize what we're talking about. And personalizing information is extremely important when we're talking about preparing for emergencies. All right, I'm going to turn this back over to Raynika, and she's going to talk specifically about the Do One Thing program.
All right, thank you. And so in this section, we are going to talk about Do One Thing so that you become familiar with the program. Definitely, if this is your first time hearing about Do One Thing, we definitely want to encourage you, in addition to going through this course, familiarizing yourself with our website and looking at all that we have to offer. If you don't know, Do One Thing is an award-winning program. We've received awards from FEMA and the CDC, as well as the International Association of Emergency Managers, for being a program that really focuses on approaching the entire community when it comes to emergency preparedness. So the goals that we have, everyone in the community has access to the information about risk and vulnerability that allows them to make informed decisions. That's information that you can get from your local emergency manager, that you can find in the news, different places like that. Everyone also has an opportunity to learn to become a better disaster decision maker as well. Why do one thing? Of course, Rhonda touched on this as well, that it's easy, it's inexpensive, and it's effective as well, but it helps overcome those barriers, a lot of what Rhonda just mentioned, and that preparedness doesn't have to be hard or expensive. So we're going to go through the steps that anyone can take so that they are better prepared. And again, these are small steps that people can take at each time. So what do you want to do when you're talking about Do One Thing is remind your audience that and lots of resources is just one change that a disaster makes in our environment. And remember, again, disasters change things. You can share a personal story with someone about the impacts of a disaster or an emergency that you may have experienced yourself. Gives them a chance to think about how a specific disaster, such as a power outage, would affect their household. Are you presenting to a group that requires electricity for their medical equipment, or a mom who has to use an electric stove to warm a bottle? Those are all the things that you want to think about when you're presenting to your audience once you know who they are. You are the only one who can ensure your own safety and the safety of your family in a disaster. So you want to talk to your audience about how many ambulances or other emergency services are available in your community on any given day. Stress that during a disaster, all of those resources may not be available at any given time. They may not be enough. So we all have to be responsible for our own safety so that we're prepared in case those resources are not available for us. Again, if you know about any organizations in your community that help during disasters, you can talk about them, such as CERT, the Community Emergency Response Team, or VOAD. There may be even other disaster organizations that you have in your community. If you aren't familiar with them, check to see what is available in your community. You can start by asking your local or county emergency manager to let you know what opportunities are available, and stress that to those that you are presenting to. They may very well want to be involved with some of those organizations and keep up to date with what they are doing and what's going on. And again, just talking about becoming better prepared. Again, every step that you take will definitely help first responders. The better off that we are prepared, it lessens the burdens on our first responders. So even if people can't volunteer, just being prepared helps the community. If they don't need help, like Rhonda mentioned, these are resources that can go to other people in our community that have a need. Preparedness isn't a machine, just like Rhonda mentioned, that you have to have everything in place. You can definitely, start with small tools, small steps, so that everything is in place, so that you are better off in emergency or disaster. So if you have your food supply, that's a great start. You may not have everything in place, but that's definitely a huge piece that's going to help you when the time comes and you are trying to recover from a disaster or an emergency. So here's the step. There's 3 steps to the program that we let everyone know that we're presenting to. So the first step is you want to go to our website, www.doonething.com, and download the fact sheet for that month. So this month is April, so the theme for this month is food. All of our resources are available online, but not everyone has the ability to go on the internet and download the information. So that's why partnering with local volunteers like you and other organizations is very important. You are able to be the link to get that preparedness information out to people that are most vulnerable where they live. For example, last year we were able to do a presentation at a senior citizen community fair. So adults that were ages 60 and up pretty much were the audience. So a lot of them don't have access to get online and do a lot of printing. So we make sure that we have plenty of materials for them to go ahead and download. The next step is you are to choose one thing from the list to do for your family or community. So you'll get 3 different things that you can choose from. That can be, like, for example, for this month with food, that could be making sure that you have your food supply. That could be make sure you are able to meet the dietary needs within your household, as well as being able to ensure that if the power does go out, that you're able to make sure that your food in your refrigerator and freezer stays safe. And then step 3, simply just doing that one thing. It's about taking action, taking that first step, which is usually the hardest or can be the hardest. So give your audience a chance to talk about how they might implement the preparedness action. Once you have talked it through, they're more likely to go home and take the action, as well as listening to others, what they're going to do in their own plan could also encourage other people as well. Okay, and as you see here, this is our Do One Thing calendar. This is a complete list of the 12 steps. By taking 1 step a month, you'll be better prepared for an emergency during that month. At the end of the year, and we get this question a lot, does the program change at the end of the year? It doesn't. It stays the same. So your options are to go back and update what you have already done, or you can choose other options from that list of 3 things that you get every month to do for that month. We have tons of materials, again, because we really focus on approaching the community as a whole. Our materials are in large print. We also have them translated in 7 different languages. Here in our Do One Thing office, we have our materials in Braille, and they are available upon request. We have audio versions of our fact sheets. We have low literacy fact sheets, which is what you see here, that give pictures to explain what those steps are for those that have trouble reading. And why focus on vulnerability individuals? As Rhonda touched on as well, many people with disabilities feel a loss of control every day, so disasters can actually make that worse. So preparedness activities can relieve stress by giving back a sense of control before, during, and after a disaster. So it can allow people to stay in their homes after a disaster, which can be very important. A lot of people wish to not have to relocate, so it allows people to prepare so that they can have those resources close at hand so that they don't have to be displaced afterwards. Overcoming barriers, and again, something we touched on just a little bit, but thinking about your audience, what kinds of barriers might they face during an emergency? As I mentioned, with the senior community, their barriers may be different from those if you're presenting to a group of students. Think ahead of time so that you can answer their questions confidently. You want to make sure that you are able to address whatever their concerns are. So looking at our graphic here, understanding if you're presenting to people that have barriers that involve language, cognitive disability, they wouldn't be able to understand instructions, especially if they're given on the news or if they hear them on the radio or TV. For those that have mobility issues, for those that are in a wheelchair, use a cane or a walker, I went and did a presentation last year to a senior community. They lived in an apartment, so completely all of seniors. There was a power outage, and they all expected the property manager to supply a generator to keep the power on in the building. Well, the property manager said that they were not responsible for having the power turned on. So you're talking about 4 dozen senior citizens who were without power for 2.5 days. Some of them that used wheelchairs, electric wheelchairs, that could not use them because they could not charge them, and they had to figure out ways to stay safe. So sometimes they had to leave, sometimes they just had to figure out what the best thing they could do. Hence, they were not prepared for that. So that's where we came in, and we were able to talk through some of the challenges and barriers that they have. And then in that same situation, resources, no vehicle. Some of them did not have a vehicle, so some of them could not leave. And they had to call for friends and family members to come and pick them up to help them get their needs met. So again, making sure you know what barriers your audience has. And now we will move on to Unit 3, and Rhonda will take over this unit.
And every time Raynika said, as Ronda touched on, she means Rhonda, stop taking my stuff. I'm getting ahead of her as well as myself. I'll try to do better. So we're going to talk about teaching and presenting. You know, whether you have a lot of experience public speaking and teaching, or whether you have none at all, you can be a really great ambassador for Do One Thing and for emergency preparedness. So let's talk first about how you like to learn. And just think this through. When you're learning, do you like to just sit and listen and take notes? Do you like to discuss and ask questions during the presentation? Are you a group discussion person, or are you, I'd rather think it out on my own person? I'll give you just a second to think about that. And then think about what kind of presenter you are. If you have done a lot of presentations, are you an interactive presenter? Do you like to be right down there talking to the group, getting feedback from them? Do you like to give your whole presentation before you take questions? Are you flexible? Would you like to do whatever's best for the audience? And there are no wrong answers to either one of these. What we're really trying to highlight is what works for you, just so that you can see what works best for your learners. And the people that you're presenting to really are learners. What we're trying to do when we give preparedness information is have people create knowledge. If emergency preparedness was just learning something like stop, drop, and roll, it would be easy. Stop, drop, and roll works for most people. But responding to an emergency is complex. It varies based on the person, their circumstances, what's important to them, what they can and can't do. So we really want them to create a specialized knowledge in their head about how they would respond to an emergency or a disaster. So you want to do what works for them as an audience, but you also want to present in a way that works for you. And finding that balance is really important. And just to touch again on creating knowledge, you create knowledge when you discuss something. It's not just getting the facts. You get a fact, but you personalize it and you create that knowledge when you discuss, when you have an opportunity to reflect on it and think about it, and when you get a chance to apply it. Those are all things that can help people create knowledge, and that's what we want our Do One Thing audiences to be able to do. So look for opportunities as a presenter. You may not be able to help with all three of these things, but if you can find an opportunity for each one of your groups to be able to do at least one of these things, it's going to really help them create that knowledge. So the most important thing to remember about being an instructor or a presenter for Do One Thing is to be yourself. You know, risk communication is giving people information that they don't necessarily want. It's information that isn't always positive. It can cause stress. And we need the audience to be able to trust the presenter, because when you feel like you can trust the presenter and that the presenter cares about what they're presenting, it's a lot easier to take that information and to really learn something useful from it. So be yourself. And you know, nobody is a perfect presenter, but present in a way that plays to your strengths and gives you a chance to work on your weaknesses. And then again, give opportunities for discussion if you can. You know, not all groups like to discuss. Some groups don't. If the group knows each other already, they're going to be a lot more willing to give examples and engage in discussion sometimes. Some age groups are more willing to engage in discussion than others. Some, you know, if it's a club or an organization, there are characteristics about that club or an organization that might attract people who are more open or more want to keep to themselves. But be respectful of attendees' time, but at the same time, we want you to be able to give a chance for people to discuss things. But make sure you stick to your beginning and ending times. That really shows some respect for your audience. And for Do One Thing, having a successful teaching experience is when people learn. And that's really how we measure our success. If we teach something, we know we're successful when somebody actually learns it and applies it. That's how we know Do One Thing is successful, because people take it and they actually apply it and use it and become better prepared. And knowledge is more than facts, and that is never more true than with emergency preparedness. You know, knowing that tornadoes happen is different than knowing that a tornado can hit your house, and that it could impact you and your family and your home. So we need people to personalize the information, and we need them to build a mental framework that will help them interpret information that they get in an emergency and know how to respond to it. And that starts, successful training really starts with the introduction. You know, you want to tell people who you are and why you're there, you know, and really when you do that, you're telling somebody a story about yourself. If I tell you that my name is Ronda Oberlin and I've been the Hazard Mitigation Coordinator in Lansing, Michigan for 17 years, and I am one of the founding members of Do One Thing, I've told you a lot about myself. I've told you why I'm here, what my qualifications are for presenting the information that I am, and I've even given you an idea why I care about what I'm presenting. So it doesn't have to be, your introduction doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be detailed, but it should establish your credibility and give people a comfort level with the information that you're presenting to them. You want them to be able to trust what you're telling them. And if people already know you, you can say less. If they don't know you, then you may want to say more. And you may want to share at this point, share something about what motivates you to be prepared, an experience or something that's happened to you. And know your audience. You know what they're interested in or concerned about. How are they used to getting their information is something else. Is this a group that's used to sitting and listening? Is this a group that's used to being more active and getting up and discussing? Every audience is going to be different. And if you're not sure what they're interested in, ask them. Again, make it an icebreaker. Say, you know, tell me something that you would want to protect in a disaster. It's going to give you a chance to learn more about them, and it's also going to get them started talking about their concerns, and that's important. You know, you can use a variety of techniques. You can show videos. We have a lot of videos on the Do One Thing site. We're certainly not the only source of videos about emergency preparedness. We have, you know, like I said, like Raynika mentioned, we have the audio fact sheets. We have a lot of different resources that you can use, but break things up. If your audience isn't one that wants to sit the whole time, you know, build in some discussions, build in some other things. All right, so we've got 2 videos here, and yep, we really do. We're going to look at both of them. They're very short, and then we'll talk about them for just a minute.
Your first aid kit, an alcohol pad, a little dog, a few band-aids. Little things to keep around for those little emergencies. But what if your emergency before you so little? Get ready. Get prepared. Visit www.do1thing.us to learn what you should know. Your first aid kit. A few band-aids, some alcohol pads, a little gauze. Little things to keep around for those little emergencies. Which holiday say? There's no such thing as a little emergency. Get ready. Get prepared. Visit www.do1thing.us to learn what you should know.
All right, so you can see the just changing the main character in the video will make it appeal to different audiences. And by the way, the web address that was in there, www.do1thing.us, is an alternate address. It was the first address that we had many years ago, but it does still work. But we direct people to www.doonething.com. So you can see that changing the main character of a video is going to make it more appealing. And think about other changes that you could make, and we can talk about this after. I apologize. If Raynika and I were better at technology, we could discuss it now because we don't mind discussing things during presentations, but we are slightly technology impaired, so we're going to hold that till after. But think about what other changes you could make. I mean, are there different focuses? In the first video, you see a mother taking care of her child, and that's a motivator in itself. The second video, you see a senior. And people, as Raynika mentioned, people tend to accept information from people that they trust and people that they already know better than, from a stranger. The same thing is true with a presenter. People are more likely to accept and be open to information from somebody who shares characteristics with them. Seniors like to learn from seniors. Young people like to learn from young people, and that's not an absolute. But you want to know that the person that you're talking to, especially when you're getting difficult information, is somebody that's had the same experiences that you have. Now, having said that, you're never, you may not be the perfect match for the group that you're presenting to, but you're willing to present to them, and that makes you a very valuable part of Do One Thing. And you can, it's not an absolute that you have to be like the same age or the same race or the same ethnicity or the same anything as the people that you're talking to. Just understand what their interests are and their needs are and their concerns are. So we want you to engage with the audience. We want you to connect with them as much as possible. We want you to personalize it, change your presentation, change your examples. If you are presenting to a group of mothers, you're going to want to use examples where you're talking about their kids. If you're presenting to a group of seniors and you want to talk about what to put in an emergency kit, you'll want to talk about having a list of prescriptions and batteries for hearing aids or, some things like that, things that are of concern with them. And we want you to share stories. Stories are a big part of preparedness, a big part of risk communication, because people are more likely to move from awareness to intention, and that's our goal, is to move people from awareness to attention to action. And people are more likely to make that last step if they're given descriptions rather than statistics. If they don't have personal experiences of their own, if they can hear about somebody else's personal experience, that's going to be a motivating factor for them. And not everybody's experienced a disaster. Not everybody's been through an emergency. So your stories or stories that you're sharing about other people are really important tools. Even getting the people in the audience to share stories can be a really good teaching tool. And here's an example. This is just a quote from a person who was involved in the Alberta wildfires last year, and it's just when I got in the shower earlier today, the sky was blue, and when I got out, the sky was black. That is an excellent story, very short, but what does it tell you? It tells you that disasters change things in a way that me saying disasters change things doesn't. It's a powerful way that we can back up the facts that we're giving people. So when you are telling a good story has one main character, and you need to tell whether it's real or fictional. Now, I've told you a lot of stories since we've started this even. I told you a story about somebody working in a high-rise that got a safety briefing or didn't get a safety briefing. That was a fictional story. I told you how I was an anxious child. I was worried about tornadoes. And you knew, in both of those cases, I hope, whether or not the character was real or fictional. Stories should have a familiar environment, something that people can connect to, and they should have a point. And they should be positive, and this is really important. We don't want to overwhelm people. We don't want to make them not want to think about disaster. Our goal is to have them think about emergencies and disaster. And to do that, we need to have positive stories. Now, not all stories that are related to disasters are positive, and that's okay. But if you do have a story that could have had a better outcome, then have a discussion at the end about what could have made that outcome better. And stories should have a call to action. I mean, obviously our two-line story about the Alberta wildfires didn't necessarily have a call to action, and that's fine too. But when you're wrapping up a story, wrap it up with discussion or wrap it up with a call to action saying, what would you do differently? Storytelling is about connecting. and giving people a chance to construct. It's a way of discussing and reflecting. And it gives people a chance to say, okay, what would I do if I was in that situation? And that helps them construct that knowledge that they need. It helps them personalize. You can see yourself in a story. And it empowers people. You think, you know, if he could do that, then I could do that too. You know, you see somebody like yourself succeeding, and it makes you believe that you can succeed as well. Another thing that storytelling does is it expresses empathy. You know, I could give you statistics about flooding, or I could tell you a story about flooding. And which one makes me seem more warm and more approachable? Well, obviously the story about flooding is going to do that more than statistics. And stories create trust, especially if you're telling stories about yourself. And it motivates action, which is what we're trying to do. And here's an example of what not to do. We want you to focus on the positive. Again, empowerment, personal responsibility, relief from stress. And if you overwhelm people, as you see in this picture, people are likely to look at it and say, there's nothing I can do, and just walk away, turn away, and not want to deal with it. When you talk about fear and anger and anxiety in a negative way, it makes people want to not talk about it, and it leads to a sense of fatalism, and makes them just shut out anything that you have to say. So Do One Thing is really an emergency management program, emergency preparedness program that focuses on the positive, focuses on empowering people. All right, so tips as presenters. If you've had a lot of experience presenting, then these are things that you already know. And if you haven't presented before, they're really important tips to make your presentation more comfortable. Make eye contact with people. Move around the room if you can. You can't always do that because of technology. You may be stuck in one spot. But if you can move around, move around. Look around. Make eye contact with different people. Ask people questions. Engage them in conversation. And then watch for signs of people losing interest. If you haven't seen these, it's probably because you don't have teenagers and you don't know what they look like. But, you know, looking around the room, looking at the clock, squirming in your seat, dozing off, that's another one. And there are different things that you can do. Change gears. Ask a question. Move to the other side of the room. Show a video. There's a lot of different things that you can do when you see people starting to lose intention. And if it's a long enough presentation, give them a break and let them get up and move around. There we are, watching it for signs. See, I'm ahead of myself again. At least I'm ahead of myself and not Raynika. So in ways to re-engage the audience. Again, ask for input, saying, what do you think? Does this sound right to you? Is this something that you've experienced? Change the pace. Talk faster, talk slower, or just give them a chance to take a break. So there are challenges. You know, everybody who's presented knows that there are people in the audience sometimes, and I'll say this again later, I know that I'm getting ahead of myself, but something that I tell people who haven't done a lot of public speaking is that the audience is on your side. And that's absolutely true. But in some cases, there are people who are going to be disruptive. So we're going to look at 3 different examples. One is a person who disputes what you say. The second is somebody who asks for advice on something that you may not know the answer to. And the third is someone who becomes fearful or becomes anxious as you're talking. All right, so the disputer. If something with whatever they're disputing is minor, it doesn't really need to be addressed. For instance, I was doing a class where I was teaching people to evaluate disaster damage. And I showed a video, and I said something about the video being taken from a police car, and someone in the audience said, no, that couldn't have been taken from a police car, look at the angle and something else, and it wasn't a big deal. It was a small dispute. I acknowledged it briefly, nodded, smiled at him, whatever, and moved on. Not every dispute needs to be dealt with right then. But if it's a bigger issue, especially if someone is saying that, someone in the audience says that what you're saying is wrong. If you're presenting a piece of information, for instance, if in my example, if I had been talking about whether damage to a building was minor or major, and somebody had disputed and said, no, you're wrong, that's something that should be addressed. Because at that point, people don't know who to believe. They don't know whether they should believe you, the presenter, or this other person, and that can cause uncertainty. And we don't want that. So at that point, you need to just stop, state why you know what you know, why you're sure of what you the information you're presenting, and then let that person know that if they want to discuss it further, you can discuss it after class, but out of respect for everybody else's time, you're going to move on. So the tough question, somebody who's asking, for instance, Raynika had someone ask her at a presentation financial advice. How would she handle this financial problem that's related to disaster? Raynika, not being a financial advisor, you can either offer to get the information or advise them to see someone else, which is what Raynika did, advise them to see a person who is an expert. Now, if it's somebody where you're coming back again in a few weeks or in another month and it's a question that you can find an answer to and bring back, then definitely do that. But if it's a question that you are just not an expert in, if you're not sure of something, say you're not sure of it, whatever it is, even if it's related to this material that you're presenting. Acting confident when you're not confident can cause problems down the road if it turns out that you're wrong. Another example that's given here is asking if anybody else has an experience that they can share that might address the person's question. And the anxious learner, the thing is that not knowing about emergencies doesn't make emergencies not happen. And you can say these things to people or something similar, that nothing you're going to hear today is going to make an emergency any more or less likely to happen, but it will make you be able to better deal with it when it does. Nobody wants to spend their time worrying about emergencies. The goal is to be prepared so that you don't have to worry. And so just trying to stress the positive. Yes, it's not great. It's not comfortable to talk about flooding. It's not comfortable to talk about disaster or possible emergency, but talking about it is going to lead to less stress, and it's going to lead to something positive, and that's what you should focus on. And there might be more than one right way to handle any disruption, any challenge, and as you get more experience, you'll get to be more comfortable. Nobody is going to have 100% successful presentations all the time. You're going to get out there and you're going to do the best you can, and you're going to learn from it. And you're going to look back and laugh at some of these things someday. But the main thing to remember is, keep stressing the positive. Be respectful of everybody else's time if there are interruptions. And always be polite and respectful. And so here you go. Remember that the audience is always on your side. And if you've ever sat through a presentation where the presenter was uncomfortable, it's really painful for the audience too. The audience wants you to be successful. Stress the success, stress the positives, and focus on your own success too. Like I said, everybody's going to have a bad presentation every once in a while, and that's fine. But focus on the positive, focus on the things that you learned and the things that you've done right, and pick out a few things that you can work on for next time. And remember that your message is important. The people in your audience are there for a reason. They want to learn. And make sure that you're doing the best you can for that. Not everybody's going to respond positively, but don't let that distract you. Make sure that everybody else in the audience gets what they need. So we do encourage you to do an evaluation form or to ask for feedback. You can also do an online survey. We do not ask Do One Thing ambassadors to send those things back to us. If there are things that you've learned and you want to share them with us, that would be amazing and awesome, and we would be glad to hear it. Do One Thing as a program is very, it's like a franchise. We're the head company, and people take it and they go off and they use it, and they don't have to report back to us. All we ask is that you use the program as it's intended to be used. We do have some brand guidelines on our website, but we have monthly presentations for each topic that you're welcome to use. You're also welcome to create your own. We want to be a good partner for you getting this information out. So as an ambassador, you are an independent contractor out there presenting this information, and all we ask you to do is do it in good faith. We do have a website. We've got social media accounts. We definitely encourage you to interact with us and let us help you as much as we can. Our goal is to get this preparedness information out to as many people as possible. So yeah, share your feedback if you'd like. You don't have to. The reason that we're stressing evaluation form and getting feedback is for you, to make sure that your presentations are as good as the best they can possibly be. All right, now Raynika is going to talk about creating opportunities.
Alrighty, thank you. Different ways that you can participate. You'll see from the list here, there's a number of different things that you can do. I'll give an example. Price County, Wisconsin, the emergency manager there, I think the town has about 900 people. We're really excited about Do One Thing. They decided to put a newspaper article in their local paper about Do One Thing, and they also held a Do One Thing booth at their county fair. And then they were also interested in putting Do One Thing brochures into all of the electric bills that goes out to their small town. So those are just a number of ways that you can begin to get involved with Do One Thing. Again, creating your own opportunities and finding different ways that you can do that. As you see on the list, you can use some of our infographics that we have, again, online to use as well. You can make a National Preparedness Month project, which Preparedness Month is in September. Have a Do One Thing session at a kids camp. Not something that you would probably think of off the top of your head, but definitely engaging our younger prepareders to begin to think about emergency preparedness. Available online, we have our PowerPoint presentations, one for each month that you are available for you to go online and to download those for your use. Just like two of the videos that you just saw there, there's a ton more for each month as well online. Our brochures and fact sheets that you see here are also on our website. We also have a banner that if you wanted to actually add a Do One Thing banner to your organizational website and say that you have partnered with Do One Thing and you're promoting Do One Thing, that can also be done. So just lots of different ways that you can begin to promote Do One Thing. Here we have, this is our Prep and Perry coloring book. We partnered with Michigan State Police and put this together. And it walks children through, with the help of their parents, on what to do in case of an emergency or disaster. The PDF copy of that is available on our website, as well as our Do One Thing business books. And those are, again, on our website. And it also has a theme for each month for businesses to go through to begin to take those small steps so that their businesses are prepared as well. Social media, we're definitely very active in social media, so I would encourage you now, if you are sitting next to your phone or if you happen to have another device handy, to definitely follow us on Facebook and Twitter and the other social media platforms that you see here. We're posting things regularly, so you can definitely begin to share those with those that you're friends with and those that you follow as well. And as you begin to become active and promoting Do One Thing, again, you'll find it really useful to begin to use those materials as well. Do One Thing has over 600 partners. If you wanted to go through all of them, you definitely are more than welcome. They're listed on our website. But here is just a list of some of those that we have partnered with. But just to give you an idea of the different types of organizations, you know, nonprofits, schools, hospitals, different businesses, individuals, anyone who wants to get involved are definitely able to partner with our program. Also our faith-based communities as well. If you are involved in any of those organizations, it's definitely another platform where you can begin to promote Do One Thing as well. Tips for working a booth. So definitely want to, again, know your audience, and even in terms of thinking of a booth, definitely want to know your audience and who is going to be there. Now, again, doing a senior fair is going to be a lot different from doing a back-to-school fair. If you're doing the back-to-school fair, you definitely want to have tons of our coloring books on hand and crayons. But, you know, senior fair, you may want to have some of our larger print fact sheets. But also to keep in mind, you want to be approachable, smile when you see people people, ask people, have they ever heard of Do One Thing? Find out if they have their own emergency plan. I find that works really well when talking to people. Ask them, have they begun to start any emergency planning? It's also good to really listen to people and engage in conversation with them. We hear lots of stories of the different experiences people have had in disasters and where they are in their planning process and what they plan to do moving forward. And promotional materials, again, on our website, there are graphics that people can use to make their own signs. Again, using the Price County, Wisconsin, they also were able to make their own banner and their own table skirt as well. But we do have some of that in our office for those that if you plan to do it regularly, we may be able to provide you and let you borrow some of our materials, such as our table skirts that we have here. We also have our infamous Do One Thing calendars that come out every year around August, September that we use to promote our program. And so those are really great to have at the booth as well. And having different giveaways at the booth is really good. Having candy that always draws people to the table. And if you wanted to think outside the box, you could do something a little different. I know one time I did a game where I had my go bag, which is the bag that has all of my emergency supplies in it, and I had to sign up that had people guess what was in my go bag. And so people would come up and they would guess what are those main items that you they thought you should have in your bag. And so people were it was a really fun game, and people were really surprised that they forgot some of the essential things that they would need to have in their bag, but it definitely kept people engaged, and it was a fun game to play as well. Now this is our unit review, which is our last unit. And again, just recapping some of the information that we went over in each unit. The goal of emergency preparedness is to help people to become better disaster decision makers. The people who face challenges before a disaster will be hit hardest and have the most difficulty recovering, as well as the key to overcoming those barriers to preparedness is to make sure that people understand that disasters change things. Again, those three words that you definitely want to keep in mind. During Unit 2, we are designed to help overcome those barriers to preparedness, to make sure that people know that it's easy, it's inexpensive, and as long as they know what to do, it takes away the stress and the overwhelming and anxious feeling that comes with thinking about emergencies and disasters. Our program also has materials in different formats so that it's able to reach as many people as possible. In Unit 3, Rhonda talked about teaching and how it's successful when people learn, not just giving people facts. Discussing the difference between a teacher and those that are participating encourages learning and how people learn, and definitely knowing what type of learner you are and what type of teacher you are makes a huge difference. And again, understanding your audience and what motivates them will make you a better instructor. So again, looking back at the visual that we had on the slide that lists the different things that people may select as the reasons why they were motivated to prepare. And lastly, looking at Unit 4, again, as I just touched on, creating those opportunities, giving out materials, reporting at different meetings, fairs, neighborhood events are great opportunities. Again, using those platforms and those organizations that you're already involved in are great places to start. Again, going back to people being able to trust information from people that they already know and that they have a relationship with as well. You can partner with organizations who are interested in helping their community. I find that lots of different businesses, especially small local businesses, they really like to get involved in helping their community because they want to be able to see that return. The sooner their community can bounce back, it definitely helps them as a business owner as well. So at this time, I will turn it over back over to Cassandra.
I want to thank our presenters, Ronda and Raynika. Raynika and Ronda, did you have anything else?
No, just thank everyone for their attention and for their interest in emergency preparedness.
Yep, same thing here. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, my information is on the screen there. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact me.